Let's get right into it and let's get into this thing. Baker Mayfield to the Carolina Panthers. So I know I'm a little late on this topic, but I want to touch on it. Me being a big Panthers fan, I've even got a Panthers podcast that I do. Um, you know, ever since Cam Newton left, not the second time, the first time, uh, we've been struggling at the quarterback position for a long time. And, we made the Sam Darnold trade last year. Absolutely did not work. We drafted Matt Corral this year. Is he ready? Not ready. We're not sure. I like a lot of his potential. I like a lot of things that he can do, but is he ready yet? Is he the guy that's going to come in and save Matt Rule's job this year? For a third round quarterback, that's really high expectations. So what do the Panthers do? There have been talks about this Baker Mayfield trade for quite some time. Obviously, the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson. They gave up a boatload of picks for him. And, despite everything that's going on there, we kept hearing about, hey, are the Panthers going to get Baker Mayfield? It's really between us and the Seahawks. Those were the two teams that really needed quarterbacks. And I think it was a matter of money, and they finally got the money right. The Panthers only had to pay $4.8 million, I think, of the contract. The Browns ate the rest. The Panthers gave up a fifth-round pick. A fifth-round pick for a starting quarterback in the NFL. Despite what you might think of Baker Mayfield, how good he is, what he's worth, fifth-round pick, which can turn into a fourth-round pick if he plays 70% of the snaps this season, which I'm going to go ahead and say that will likely happen. So, the Panthers, looking at it from a non-biased perspective as best as I can, looking at the team as a whole, when Christian McCaffrey is healthy, they have a fantastic running back. The best running back in the league when healthy. He hasn't been healthy in the past 2 years. They've got some nice playmakers on the outside. I like DJ Moore a lot. Robbie Anderson has had his moments. Last year was not one of them. He had a lot of drops. He had a bad year. I think he can bounce back, but in the beginning, it seemed like he was not very happy with Sam Darnold being his quarterback, and then he's not going to be happy with Baker Mayfield being his quarterback either. So we will see how that goes. And then we've got Terrace Marshall Jr., a guy they drafted last year in the mid rounds. He's got a lot of potential. He's had a good mini camp, he had a good camp, but not a training camp. They said he looked good out there. We'll see how that goes. I have a lot of hope for him. We want to see him do well. And then you got Tommy Tremble. He's a guy they drafted in the later rounds in the tight end position last year. I like Tommy Tremble. I think he's got a lot of potential. And then we look at the defense. They've got some good young pieces there. Brian Burns, solid player. J.C. Horn, the first-round pick last year, he was hurt. We'll see how he does there. I have a lot of hope for him. I think he can be a fantastic player, but he just was hurt last year. I think he played 2 games, made it to the third game, was out for the season. Jeremy Chin at the safety position. They got Shaq Thompson at linebacker. So they got some guys. And the biggest thing, and that now, right now, this is just on paper. We don't know this because we haven't seen them play, but on paper, the Panthers have a much improved offensive line as opposed to last year in many seasons. They haven't had a great offensive line or even a serviceable offensive line since like 2013. They have a first-round pick this year. They draft, I can't pronounce his name. I'm just going to call him Icky from NC State. Kid's from Charlotte. He's going to be a fantastic pick. I like him a lot. They get him at the left tackle position. I have almost no doubts about this kid. He's going to be a very, very good football player. They bring in some free agents. They bring in Bradley Bozeman. They bring in Austin Corbett. Some guys that are very solid starters. They even draft some guys in the later rounds. And then they drafted Brady Christensen last year. He was a little bit of they couldn't really figure out what they wanted to do with him. If you're a Matt Rule fan, you weren't really sure if his arms were long enough to play left tackle. So he did a little bit of left tackle, left guard, right guard. He kind of played everywhere, honestly. So you could slide him in one of those positions. And on paper, the Panthers have a much improved offensive line. That's huge. So, coming into this, I was never a huge Baker Mayfield fan. In fact, if you go back and listen to some of the Panthers podcasts, which I will put in the description, of course, for you to listen to, I was critical of the move. I thought that they didn't need to do it. I would have rather go with Matt Corral and see what he had and see how the season goes. Because I'm not the biggest fan of Matt Rule. I think he's done a lot of bad things as a coach. But when you take a look at it, looking at it now, I think Baker Mayfield has been severely underrated the past couple months. He's been getting a lot of hate, a lot of criticism thrown his way ever since the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson. Obviously, he was going to get traded somewhere, but, I think I think he's been underrated. I mean, if you look at not this season, but the past season, they made the playoffs. Granted, they had a very good offensive line, a very good running game, and a pretty solid defense. Baker was out there making plays, and, he's a gunslinger. He's got the arm talent. He's got that mentality, kind of that dog mentality, which I like. We haven't had that since 2015 Cam Newton. It's been a while. So it's nice to see a guy that's going to come in with a chip on his shoulder. And if you watch that press conference the other day, whenever the Panthers had him on, he's fired up. He's ready to play. So was I the biggest fan of this move when I thought about it before it happened? No, I wasn't. I didn't think that this guy really could bring anything to the table. But now that I sit back and I look at it, from a personnel perspective, the Panthers got a guy who's not arguably, is better than Sam Darnold at quarterback. A guy that's won in this league. He's won a playoff game. A guy he's got some experience, and he's had his moments where he's looked pretty damn good. Now, do we know which Baker Mayfield we're going to get? We don't know that, because last season he was hurt and he didn't play very well. And we had all the stuff with OBJ going on, and we had all the, off-season stuff, and then we had, where they traded him, obviously, and then where they talk about the Browns saying, we want a grown-up at quarterback. I mean, just throwing it in his face. Just, he's got a chip on his shoulder, and I've been critical of him in the past. At some points I like him, sometimes I haven't through his career, but he is on my team now, so I'm going to root for him. But from a non-biased perspective, I think he's got a good opportunity to come in here and play some good football. He's got some talent beside him, and it's his job to lose. We saw how Sam Darnold played last year. People say it's going to be a competition. It's not going to be a competition. If he loses this battle to Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, I would be shocked. I would be astonished if he lost this competition. He's going to be the guy day one, week one, and guess who was playing week one? The Browns in Carolina, and I will be there at that game, so I'm very excited for that. I go to the home opener every year for the Panthers, so I'm very excited for that. But looking at it, he's got a fresh start. He's got some weapons, and I think he's going to win the job. There's no way he doesn't win this job. The only cons I could see of this is the head coach. I don't care for Matt Rule that much. However, I will say that they did do a nice job of bringing in some nice assistant coaches, offensive, defensive coordinators, assistant coaches, guys that have experience. Matt Rule tried to do it the college way with young guys, unproven guys. It didn't work. So he goes the opposite direction this offseason, or the front office does. They bring in guys that have experience. So I like that move. It's actually funny because Ben McAdoo, who is our new offensive coordinator, I will say not a great head coach, but he was solid as an offensive coordinator. When you look at the draft class, I believe it was 2018 or 2017, I can't remember off the top of my head, whenever Baker and Sam came out, he had them at the bottom of his list for quarterbacks that he wanted, that he graded. And he had Josh Allen up there at the top. Granted, we don't have the luxury of having Josh Allen, but these were his two quarterbacks that he was the lowest on. And that's the two quarterbacks that he's going to be able to coach. So that's an interesting thing to look forward to. And if we're looking at this from a perspective, this is the only other con I could see, is that this Baker needs to play either amazing or he needs to play bad if you're a Panthers fan. And what I mean by that is the worst thing he can do is come in and play very average, because that's going to put us in a position where if he plays very average, there's a possibility, a strong possibility, he's going to want a long-term contract. You know he is. Are you willing to tie yourself to him for X amount of years, or are you going to not settle for average play and then move on from him from a year and then look elsewhere to the draft or Matt Corral? So if you're a Panthers fan, I think you either want to look at this in two ways. One, he plays amazing or very, very good, takes us to the playoffs or a wild card potential. See what happens. Secondly, if he plays terrible, then we know he's not the guy. We move on, we wipe our hands clean. We got rid of a 5th or 4th round pick. We only paid $5 million. Shout out to the Panthers front office. If this works out, it's a home run. If it doesn't, it looks like a failure, but not in terms of what we gave up to get him. I think this is a solid play by the Panthers front office. And, it makes me a little excited to go into week one. I wanted Matt Corral to play and to start, but I was very nervous because I didn't know if he was ready, and I didn't want to see him come out and just not be ready. And after a couple games, his career in Carolina is over. No one thinks he's the guy. We know we have in Sam Darnold. It's not it. So I'm excited. We're going to see what the Panthers can do. I think they've got some talent around. They've got some pieces. Now, if Baker comes in and with the chip on his shoulder and plays like we know he can, it could be a good thing in Carolina, and I'm going to be very interested to see how that goes.